Okay, continue where we left off with the Blech. So yesterday we were learning that there's, again, two parts of the Blech, primarily maybe three, if it's not a big fire and it's a big Blech, that it's not hot at all. What happens though, can you move something from one Blech to another Blech? I'll give you a simple example. What happens, somebody has a stove on and the fire goes out. You have the Blech is on, and all of a sudden you look Friday night, the fire underneath the Blech went out. It can happen. So now the question is, can I transfer the food from that Blech to another Blech? My neighbor downstairs, or if I had two stoves on, whatever the situation is. So again, if the food is completely cooked and it's not cooled yet, because then there would be Bishul after Bishul, you would be allowed to move it from one Blech to another Blech. It's the same thing. Or if something was on the fire without a Blech, let's say it was already cooked before Shabbos, or half cooked before Shabbos, and now I want to leave it hot for Shabbos. I don't want this fire, it's too big. So we learned already on Shabbos, you could put the Blech on. You're allowed to put a Blech on Shabbos, you have to be careful not to extinguish the fire. Or you can put it to somebody else's Blech. Okay, that would be allowed to do. Now, what happens if, just thinking different scenarios. So what happens if, one second, again, think crazy scenario, yeah. Okay, so the problem with solid food that wasn't on the Blech before Shabbos. Okay, I know what I was going to get into a different din. Okay, we should have to discuss that. But if the food was not on the Blech before Shabbos, or when Shabbos began, putting food onto a Blech, unless if it's part 3 of the Blech that can't cook, no matter how long you leave it there, it looks like you're cooking. Okay? So to take out, let's say you have more people Friday night than you expected. Now Shabbos day you have to take a challah out of the freezer. Okay, but it's frozen. I mean, you want to warm it up a little bit. So you have to make sure, number one, sometimes you have a bag in the freezer, the challah maybe develops a little ice on it. So that you have to make sure there's no ice, because then you're cooking with that water. But what happens, you can't put a challah directly, even though it's baked completely, and putting it on the Blech is just going to warm it up. You're not cooking it, you're not doing anything to it. Nevertheless, directly on the Blech you're not allowed to put it, because it looks like you're cooking. You're not cooking, you're not baking, but it looks like you're putting something that wasn't on the Blech, now you're putting it on the Blech. Something that was on the Blech before Shabbos, and you're just transferring it to another Blech, that's not an issue.
But it looks like cooking.
No, because you're just moving it from one place to another place, one Blech to another. It was already on a Blech.
Not everybody knows in the household what it is.
So we're not talking about, but it looks to anybody, when you take something out of the refrigerator, it looks to anybody that like you're cooking it. But if it's already on a Blech, you can move it to another Blech. That's not a problem. Now, there's shitas in halacha. This should not normally be done. It could be done b'shas adchak. We learned the other day that there's certain 5 conditions that need to be met to put something back onto the fire. Number 1, there has to be a Blech. Number 2, the food has to be completely cooked. Number 3, the food couldn't cool off completely. Okay, and the last 2 conditions is when you took it off the fire, you had in mind that you're going to put it back on the fire. And the last condition is you never put it down. You're still holding on to it. Like this even, you're still holding on to it. What happens if one of the 2 last conditions were met and the other one wasn't met? In other words, what happened on Shabbos? The food was on the Blech when Shabbos began. Because otherwise you can't do what I'm saying now. The food was on the Blech before Shabbos. I took it off. I thought I'm not going to put it back. Because I thought, that's it, we're done. But I was still holding it. Then I realized I want to put it back. Or the other way. I was knowing I wanted to put it back, but by mistake, I put it down. So if one of those two conditions still exist, and the food was on the blech when Shabbos began, you're allowed to put the food back. As long as one of those two conditions were met. If both of them were not met, then it's very difficult, Vaad Din, to allow somebody to put it back on the blech. But bottom line is, what happens, a very practical case. You're taking the chont or the soup off the fire, okay? You're holding it like this, somebody said, no, you have to put it back, somebody else is coming. So when you took it off, you didn't think you're going to put it back, but you're still holding on to it. So, you could put it back on. Or again, you're not holding it in your hand, as long as you didn't put it down on the ground. If you put it on the table, you can put it back. Yeah.
Why not just simplify the whole situation? If it's cooking, you're not supposed to put it on the blech. If it's not cooking, just simple, If it looks like cooking, if it doesn't look like cooking, if it's on the third part of the blech, just be honest with yourself. If it's not cooking, I can put it back on the blech.
You can't be honest with yourself. Halacha says what looks like cooking, what doesn't look like cooking. Halacha says when you could put it back.
So that's very simple. That's a simple definition. If it looks or it doesn't look, that's not the concept. That
the Chachamim made a gzeira, something that looks like cooking. Not only that, if somebody wasn't allowed to do chazara, and they did chazara, they can't eat the food on Shabbos unless if it cooled off completely, so you can eat it cold, which doesn't, or after Shabbos, the amount of time it takes to get it done. Because Chum said you can't do it. So because you can't do it, Chum said you're not going to gain anything by it. For instance, I'll give you an example. If somebody by mistake cooked on Shabbos, okay? So if somebody intentionally cooked on Shabbos, it means they knew they're not allowed to cook, and they cooked. It's a whole, I should mention that maybe earlier, there's a whole, at the beginning of Bishul, the Rebbe talks about that. What happens? Somebody intentionally, b'meizir, cooks on Shabbos. Okay? That person can never eat the food. Not only can he not eat the food, for him, the pot needs to be koshered. The pot becomes treif. Okay? If it's b'shaygig, means somebody did something, which can happen a lot, b'shaygig, that I didn't know you're not allowed to do it, and I did it. And by the way, that there's no opinion that says you're allowed to do it. That means everybody says you're not allowed to do it. So then if somebody did it accidentally, so he cannot eat it until after Shabbos, other people can eat it on Shabbos. One second. If it was Isid Rabbanan, that he didn't know you're not allowed to, then he can eat it himself on Shabbos also. But so, even if you do things that the Chum said you're not allowed to do, so 1 second. So what happens if somebody cooks intentionally on Shabbos? The then is he can never eat the food. Somebody else, another Jew, can eat the food right after Shabbos. Shabbos is over 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock, somebody can eat the food. He can never eat the food. He can never use the pot without kashering it. Somebody else could use the pot. Because for him, it's not treif, he can eat the food. But for the guy that did it b'meizir intentionally, because he did it, the Chum said, the pot's treif, you can never eat the food. 1 minute. Okay? If you told a guy to cook for you on Shabbos, nobody is allowed to eat the food after Shabbos until the amount of time it takes to make. That means if a guy cooked for you on Shabbos, and let's say the cooking took an hour, and Shabbos is over 8 o'clock, nobody is allowed to eat the food until 9 o'clock. If you cooked intentionally on Shabbos, a Jew cooked b'meizir intentionally on Shabbos, everybody else can eat at 8 o'clock. That means a guy is cooking, the Chachamim gave you a bigger knas, a bigger fine than if a Jew cooked. So the halacha says, what's the reason? It doesn't make sense. So it says like this. in people's eyes, telling a guy to do malacha on Shabbos is very lenient. It's kal b'nei abriyos. It's very, I'm not doing it, the Jew's not doing it, the guy is doing it. But you're not allowed to tell a guy to do a malacha on Shabbos. So because, let's say, by the way, this din is not only cooking, any din on Shabbos that you're not allowed to do, if you did it intentionally, you can never benefit from the food. Everybody else could do it after Shabbos. If a guy did it for you, everybody can eat it, not right after Shabbos, but the amount of time it takes to do that malacha. So it says in Shulchan Aruch like this, because people are very lenient telling a guy to do something, again, you're not desecrating Shabbos, you're telling a guy to do Shabbos, So because of that, the Chum said, no, you're not going to gain anything by the guy cooking. You're going to have to wait after Shabbos the amount of time that it takes to make that food. So you're not gaining anything by telling the guy to do it. What do you think? I'll tell the guy to cook it on Shabbos. I'll have it right after Shabbos. I won't have to wait an hour. I'll have it right after Shabbos. So I'll tell the guy to do it. Chum said, no, you're not going to gain anything by that. But nobody's going to tell a Jew to cook for me on Shabbos. So therefore, we're not afraid it's going to be lenient. I'm going to tell a Jew to cook for me on Shabbos because I want it 8 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock. So the Chacham weren't so strict. So therefore, right after Shabbos, you could eat it. Now, what do you want?
Let's say Friday, you put the food in the refrigerator, solid food, whatever it is. Can you put on Shabbos, let's say Shabbos lunch, whatever, are you allowed to put the food, the cold food on the blech?
We just said you're not allowed to.
No, I'm asking, I don't...
We talked...
No part of the blech?
If there's part 3 of the blech, that even if you leave it there for 50 hours, it won't become yatzah letters by, yeah, you could do it. Some people say, B'chlal, you should, our boss can write, you should never put something on the 3rd part of the blech, because you're going to move it, this and that, you're going to end up cooking it.
As long as it's not yatzah letters by, is what
If it can become to yatzah letters by, huh? Tasting has nothing to do with the temperature. What do you mean? What do you ask if you could taste what? Huh? No. So when do you want to taste it? On Shabbos or during the week?
No, I'm talking about Shabbos.
So what are you asking? If you can't cook on Shabbos, so when do you want to taste the food? No, explain the question. I don't understand your question. No, because you're eating it.
Tasting is going to stop cooking.
Huh?
The things, even if you taste it, you can't season it or anything.
Plug. If he pulled out the plug. If a Jew pulled out the plug, you could also eat the chon. You're not gaining anything by it. He's not cooking. A Jew did a separate malacha. He pulled out a plug that whatever the isser is, extinguishing, seise, whatever the malacha is, but he's not doing anything into the food. He's not doing anything to the food. Disconnecting is not helping the food cook. On the contrary, it's stopping it from cook. There's a question in halacha, by the way. We mentioned before the din that any malacha on Shabbos that a guy does for you, you can't benefit until after Shabbos. There is a question if it applies to one particular malacha. There's a question if it applies, and that is carrying. If a guy carries something for me on Shabbos, am I allowed to use it or not? Why is carrying different than every other malacha? So generally speaking, the Gemara says in Shabbos that carrying is what's called malacha gerua. It's a very weak, in English the proper word, it's a feeble type of a work. Every other malacha, the object changes. You shecht, you plant, you select, you cook. The object is becoming changed. Carrying is really, you're not doing anything. I'm just taking it from here and I'm putting it there. So I'm not gaining anything I'm not changing the object. In fact, Taisus says in the Gemara over there that that's why, how do we know you're not allowed to carry on Shabbos? All the halachos we know because it was done in the Mishkan. It was done in the Mishkan, you're not allowed to do it. But carrying it, there's a specific pasuk that Bais Rabbonim says, Al Yaitzi, Ayavi Eid Malachal Mlachas HaKedesh, Ishish Al Yavi Eid Malachal Mlachas HaMishkan, Vayikoli HaMeavi. Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jews, it was Shabbos, the Gemara learns out. Moshe Rabbeinu said, we have enough, don't bring anything from your house to the Mishkan. Their house was a private domain. The Mishkan was Rishus Harabim, public domain. And Moshe Rabbeinu told them, don't carry. So from there, the Gemara learns out, you're not allowed to carry. Otherwise, without that pasuk, you can't say, okay, they walked in the Mishkan, you're not allowed to walk on Shabbos. I mean, carrying is a very feeble mind. So the question is, it's late, but the question is, if a guy carries for me on Shabbos, am I allowed to use the object on Shabbos or not? There's some poskim want to say that you could. There's Alter Rebbe in Hilchos Pesach that says by Pesach, if a guy carried the matzah on Shabbos, you could use it. But then they question, does that mean because it's a mitzvah, maybe it's different? That doesn't necessarily mean everything else, and to be continued.